Hi everyone, and welcome to Mini Lecture 21. Today we'll be discussing pre-writing strategies, specifically free writing. Before we begin, make sure that you have the following materials for this lecture assignment, which will basically be a Word document to write on. The purpose and goals for this lecture are as follows. First, we'll define the term free writing. Then we'll understand it as a method of pre-writing, and then explore its affordances throughout the writing process. All right, so I want to begin really quickly with this clip from SpongeBob, just because I feel like it really gets at the struggle that can be writing sometimes. So let's take a quick break and just look at that.
Okay, Mr. Essay, I say, prepare to be written! I'm doing it! I'm doing it! Yeah! Yeah! In some of these, in some of these. Almost there, and done. Now let's see how it looks so far. The break time!
All right. I imagine that for most of us, that site looks all too familiar, where we know that we have to do some writing. We know that we have to basically put words on a page, but those ideas just don't flow like how we would want them to or how we hope they would. Free writing, I feel, is a good way to get around that and really to unclog any writer's block that you may be experiencing, and hopefully to avoid what SpongeBob experienced when he was writing his boating school essay. So what is pre-writing? Let's first tackle that question. Now, this is going to be the first step in the writing process. Now, I love this definition from the Glossary of Composition and Rhetoric. They define pre-writing as any activity that helps the writer think about a topic, determine a purpose, analyze an audience, and prepare to write. As you'll see from the other optional mini lectures, there are certainly different types of pre-writing, and free writing is one of those. Clustering is another, as well as outlines. And there are, of course, there are so many variations of how a writer can approach each and every one of those as well. So really what it comes down to is pre-writing is whatever helps you get the ideas out and start to form them in a way that you can communicate them with an audience, a specific audience. Also, what's important to remember is that you can utilize pre-writing strategies at any point of your composition. So it doesn't matter if you've got a finalized draft that you are ready to send out, or if you're just beginning your work. You can use pre-writing strategies to help you make sense of the content that you've developed, or perhaps develop new content. Like I said, I love using free writing whenever I experience writer's block, and I think as we start to see what free writing is and how it is executed, hopefully you might see the same thing. Briefly now, looking at what free writing is, first and foremost, it's a method of pre-writing. As you'll see here in a moment, what free writing allows us to do is to think about a topic that we're interested in or have been asked to write on, and it gives us the opportunity in a very unrestricted, unfiltered way to say what we know about the topic, what we'd be interested in exploring more on, what kind of sources we can use to support our point, what kind of text we can use to analyze certain artifacts regarding our topic. So it really gives us just the opportunity to throw everything in the kitchen sink in that we know about a topic. To contextualize, though, free writing in a bit more detail, it was developed by a scholar by the name of Peter Elbow during the Expressionist movement that came out of the 1960s and 70s. Now, the Expressionist movement really tries to tackle some of the more traditional notions of academic writing, and it tried to strip writing of its focus on grammar and mechanics and just kind of that strict structure that we saw in composition starting from when it became a more official field back in the 19th century, all the way up until the mid-20th century. And again, what it does is it sort of frees the writer to explore a topic or an idea on their own terms, rather than having to say right out the gate, well, what's my professor going to think about this? What's my audience going to think about this? It really removes that, at least in the initial stages. So when we do a free write, and like I said, this is probably going to challenge many of the traditional understandings of writing that we have, but it's fine, because again, it really does help with idea development. So when we actually go through and do some free writing, first we just want to start off with an idea of what we'll be writing on, and that can be as broad or as specific as we want. And again, we can see how this will change based off of where we are in the writing process. So if I'm just starting an essay, maybe I treat the topic very broadly. So maybe, I do e-waste or college tuition or the minimum wage, and I start off with something really, really broad. Maybe I'm stuck. Maybe I've got, a full draft ready to go, but there's maybe one paragraph, one or two, that I'm just stuck on and I don't know how to develop. Well, maybe at that point, the idea of my free writing will be a bit more narrow, a bit more focused. So rather than writing on e-waste, I could talk about e-waste recycling in sub-Sahara Africa, and that is the focus of my free write. Then what you'll want to do, once you've got that idea of what you'll be writing on, you want to set aside 10 minutes and just quite literally write whatever comes to mind. You're not going to worry about spelling, you're not going to worry about grammar, and you're not going to worry about mechanics. You also don't have to worry about your tone or your voice. What's important to remember about free writing is that it is still a form of pre-writing, meaning that aside from today's lecture assignment, no one else is going to see what you write. And in terms of today's lecture assignment, I just want to see that you have ideas on the page and that you're, giving this a fair shot. Giving free writing a fair shot is a pre-writing strategy. But in all other instances, it's just you looking at it. So develop your, and go about it in a way that makes sense to you, in language that is comfortable to you. If, you have a certain type of slang or you use certain types of jargon when talking about a topic, go ahead and use it. Doesn't matter if your audience, for your final draft will understand it. You can explain that in revision. And you can take to revision, your revision process to say, okay, well, maybe the audience won't understand it, so I should probably explain it more. Free writing totally doesn't matter. Makes sense to you, that's what matters. Also, you can use a more conversational tone. Rather than saying, okay, I need to write for my instructor, talk to your friend or structure your writing in a way as if, you're just throwing out, word vomiting to your friend about something you're interested in. And you know what? If that includes vulgarities, throw vulgarities in there as well. Again, you are the only person who's going to be reading this, so it really doesn't matter. As long as you have ideas and then, and you're resulting in directions that you can work with and further develop, that's what you should be focused on. So typically with free writes, they will last about 10 minutes. I always say go about 5 to 10 minutes because that gives you the opportunity to flesh out ideas and not feel like you're under the gun in terms of trying to get everything out and worrying that you're not going to. But 5 to 10 minutes is, again, a good time for you to think about a topic but not overthink about it. What's important, though, is keep writing, even if you can't think of something to say. Keep your pen moving, keep your fingers going on the keyboard. What I do and what I've also seen students do some kind of variation of, so you will probably see here in just a moment as I demonstrate free writing, I typically will say, I have nothing to say. I literally have no idea what could come next. And I just will go off on some tangent repeating the same phrase of, I have nothing to say, I have nothing to say. But by performing that repetitive action and repeating that phrase, it's giving my mind the opportunity to think of something to say, and then I can continue on. It's when you stop that you start to overthink and you wonder, oh, well, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? Who cares? Just write it down. You can determine if it's a good idea or a bad idea after you finish your free write and you revisit it at a later time. And as I said, use your own language. Talk to your best friend. Don't write for an instructor. So that includes slang, curse words, inside jokes. Again, you're going to be the only one reading this. Don't worry about if it makes sense to an audience. Make sure that it makes sense to you. All right, so I'm going to do a condensed free writing demonstration. And so rather than doing the 10 minutes, I'm going to do 3. And I am going to explore the topic of free college tuition. Now I'm going to demonstrate what a free write will look like. So I right now have my timer set to 3 minutes. I always recommend setting some kind of timer, that way you don't overdo it. Yeah, I like to set a timer, but I've also talked to students who will put together a short playlist, maybe of 3 or 4 songs that, balances out between, 7 to 12 minutes. And basically when the playlist is over, that means that they're done writing. So again, it really is just dependent upon each writer and whatever helps you get ideas down on paper, basically from your head to either the screen or your notebook. So I do better with a timer. So again, I'm setting my timer for 3 minutes, and I am just going to keep writing and see what we come up with. We have the free write completed. We're not done, yet there are some additional steps we can take to really make the best out of the content that we generated during the free write. First thing I'll tell you, just walk away. I recommend about an hour. Do some math homework, read a comic book, watch a TV show, play with your kids, go talk to your neighbor. Get your mind off of whatever it is that you were just writing on. And that can range from an hour to a day. I wouldn't go longer than a couple days, just to make sure that that those ideas are still fresh in your mind, but do not immediately review your free writing after you've completed it. Rather, give yourself some space. So when you return to your free write, again, if you really want to get the most out of that content, you want to carefully review the material that you generated. So you want to highlight/note the following components. So possible arguments to develop as you continue the writing process. Questions you have, perhaps for further research. Ideas that you find interesting and want to explore in greater detail. And as you go, make any helpful notes. Say, oh, hey, this is a really cool idea. And now that I've given myself some space, had a discussion in one of my other classes about this topic, maybe I can look into this. So let's return then to our demonstration. Let's go back to that Word document. And using the considerations that we just discussed, let's do some highlighting. Let's emphasize some text that we can further develop. All right, so college is really expensive, like super expensive. I'm glad you can see here, I clearly did not care about spelling. And to say I'm glad I'm done with undergrad. I don't think I could afford it at this point. I think I even saw a TV show that intended to help students pay off their loans. Is this what we've come to? That students who go to a necessary degree and have to pay upwards of $20,000 to get to have it, have to go on national TV to help them actually pay off their loans. So that is a little rant from a show that I saw a couple nights ago. So here we've got some questions. So what other country, so we've got, so that's sad, and I wonder what universal access to higher ed would look like. So that's a good question that I have. Maybe I could develop that into an argument. So I'm going to highlight it. Then I go through, and here are some questions that I could use for research. So what other countries do this? So let's highlight that in a different color, because we could say that the yellow one could extend into an argument, whereas the green text could help us form research questions later on. So I feel like Canada, most definitely the Scandinavian countries, totally see Sweden doing this. What would that look like in the US? So maybe this is something that could guide us toward an argument, a question that we could use to formulate later into an argument. And then I got into a point where I just drew a blank. I hit some writer's block and I didn't know what to say. But again, I kept on writing. And then I remembered DSU touts itself as being the most affordable university in the state of Utah. And I've always wondered why that was. So again, maybe this is a research question. Maybe all of these are research questions that I could tackle to basically say, what is DSU doing differently from the other schools in the state of Utah that makes it so affordable? I mean, we're all getting, the same degree. Why is it thousands of dollars cheaper at one school than it is another? So maybe as I'm going through and exploring the concept of free college tuition, maybe I could say, okay, well, this is what DSU is doing to keep prices down. Maybe I eventually make the argument to say, hey, maybe free college tuition isn't the way to go, but we could encourage other institutions to adopt a model similar to that of Dixie State's. Also, what I've done here is I've said, that would be, I was going to say, an interesting and manageable approach to this topic. So to say, all right, what is Dixie State doing? How could we compare this to what other institutions in the state of Utah are doing? And how could I use that as a framework or a way to analyze this topic in greater detail? So we could also use the notes feature here to say, maybe if I do decide to pursue this topic, I could use that TV show to serve as my hook for my opening paragraph. Could use this as a hook for opening paragraph. And so I'm just making notes to myself as I go, ways that I can use different content, ways that I can develop them in greater detail to really help with my writing later on. So returning back to our lecture, what I'd like you to do now is, based off of the free write that you have done, I would like you at some point, again, distance yourself from the free write a bit. So if you feel like you've had adequate time in between sort of my demonstrations, you can do this now since it was a bit of a shorter one, or you can return to it at a later time. But using the various features on Word, so comment, highlight, text, color, etc., however you can make sense of analyzing the information and content you've generated, I want you to review your free write. And then note key ideas, possible arguments, questions, etc. from your free write. So start to think, okay, what did I produce during, those 10 minutes? And how can I use them to help me develop a first draft or help me to revise a section that I'm having a difficult time with? So that, though, is the end of our lecture on free writing. If you have any questions or if there are any concepts that I can speak to further, please don't hesitate to contact me. All right, everyone, until next time.